got one last one, and I know that all of you want to hear from this because it's always something without fail that we're talking about. Imagine, if you will, a few years ago, not too long before the pandemic hit, if you were handed something like the Colorado Department of Transportation with decades and generations of frustration and anger and so much to be done and so many places you have to be spread so thin. Shoshana came on. It was a tough job. It's still a tough job. It will always be a really tough job, but she is one of the most thoughtful, dives into everything. She reads through everything. She's a bit of a nerd, I'm not gonna lie. And she just tries to figure all of this out. And I wanted you guys to make sure to kind of think that in context before she starts to speak, because her job is not the easiest. I kind of feel like maybe she did something not so great in a former life or something that she would get this job. I wouldn't take it in a million years. You are one of the bravest women I know. Please help me welcome Shoshana from CDOT.
Does this click forward?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah, for that kind introduction, and thank you, Christian and Kathy, for everyone who helped organize. And I would be remiss in not starting with a shout out to the other Kathy, who is our commission chair right now and a former Club 20 president who wanted to be here and sends her regards. Well, that was certainly a tough act to follow, and nothing says anticlimactic like being the nerd at the end of a long conference. But here we go. Really a pleasure to have a chance to be here today. Seeing many of you in person for the first time in much too long, but it's really nice to have the chance to reconnect, not as a little set of Brady Bunch squares on one of these things, and to have a chance to talk about what we've done over the course of the past year, but following the past several. And it's a really good time to be meeting because we've just done that thing you do right after the new year. We're like, oh my God, what the hell did we get done in the past year? And what I'm going to present today is sort of a teaser for a report that we have been working on that we'll be putting out in full next week, that kind of recaps the work that's gotten done over the past year, the work that's been done so far implementing the 10-year plan, and what's ahead of us for the next year. So this is a preview. I promise I've scooped everything interesting from the report in this presentation, and we will be rolling out the full thing next week with the Way Forward Coalition. So, key accomplishments of 2021, and this is a little bit of a laundry list of statistics, but as we think about how we measure the progress that we're making and hold ourselves accountable to showing what we're doing about all those projects we said we would do when we came to so many of you in so many different places to talk about developing our 10-year plan. Who knows how many years it's been now. Sarah just asked when I started, and I can barely remember because, I think the answer is 3 years, but I wouldn't swear to it because the misdeeds in the past life are sort of coming to reconciliation in real time. But, we're at that point where we can start to look back and say, like, okay, what's changed because we did that? And if we can't answer for that, like, shame on us. But the good news is that we're seeing some very real results. What this is a synopsis in total of our whole program, right? Both the 10-year plan and the asset management program, which is our bread and butter, and the things that sometimes don't get the, fizzle that comes with the big projects, but that are no less important to the communities where they are. A number that I am probably the most proud of anything in this report is that we beat our rural roads number from last year, 622 miles. It was 580 miles last year. And what's even cooler to me about this number is that of that 622 miles, about a third of it is the 10-year plan investments. So that tells us something. When we came to you to develop that 10-year plan, we made a commitment that having a real focused initiative, like the governor talked about, that was singularly focused on rural roads, and that also corrected for some of the stuff that was wrong with our model. That was a priority for us. And what these numbers together are showing us is that just on mileage alone, about a third of the rural road investment we're seeing right now is because of that 10-year plan. And that doesn't even account for the fact that those are the bigger projects. So, you get more miles when you do a chip seal than when you do a full resurfacing. And one of the problems that we found was that our models were telling us not to do full resurfacings on rural roads. So, that third that's in the plan are bigger projects than the ones that are outside. So, this tells me that we're making progress. We have more to do. And, many of you all and your neighbors have remained involved in the conversations about how to deal with the constant Gordian knot of limited resources, even with the new resources that we now have available. And there's always that trade-off between do we do the rural interstates, the state highways, the local roads, how do you balance between all of those? But all in all, we're heading in the right direction. This is just a picture of where the 10-year plan projects that are happening right now that just got completed are situated across the state. I'm sure that you can really read all the specifics, and if you can't read the project number 21291, is up there. I don't know, but it gives you a sense that they're really across the state and that we're really making sure that we take an all of Colorado approach. So talking about a little bit about the projects that we completed, and I'm gonna, make Mike McFaw proud and go CDOT region by CDOT region, starting with the one that will be the least interesting to the people in this room. But I want to give you a sense of what we're working on across the state, because it will also help to sort of show that how much the program really is making a concerted effort to be focused and stay focused on regional equity across regions, and on making sure that we define the types of projects we're doing based on the people who live there. I'll do a side note and say that I wish our friends in the federal government had a regional equity formula like ours, because we just got our allocation for the federal bridge program, and Colorado got less than Rhode Island, where I used to work, because the formula was basically based on how much water you have. Tangential note, but I think it's by way of saying that there's no perfect way to do it, but I think the thoughtful dialogue that happens in places like the Stack, just shows that we, talk about these things honestly here in a way that doesn't happen in the same way at the national level. So in the Denver region, the projects that we're working on are, probably ones that are familiar to some of you. Finishing that I-25 gap project between Colorado Springs and Denver was a huge accomplishment this year, and hopefully one that's relevant, even if a bit on the metro side. The westbound Mountain Express lanes is the managed lane on the weekends that gets into the mountains faster, big deal. The Central 70 project in Denver is one that, I know probably folks have lots of opinions about, but it is now almost done, which is great for a lot of reasons, including that it allows us to kind of rebalance the focus across the portfolio. And, the progress on Floyd Hill is something that is really going to ramp up over the next year, but it has been a real focus because of its statewide importance, and the fact that it's not just a Denver project, but also one that's so critical for access across the state. In Southeast Colorado, you can start to see those numbers on the rural roads line up. And this, for those who are not as familiar with our planning regions, is Colorado Springs area, but also everything around it. So it's a pretty broad stretch. Includes the Pueblo area, Trinidad. Really like a lot of both the South Front Range and the rural areas adjacent. And the portfolio here has really made a tremendous amount of progress on some of the kind of key secondary arterials that have needed it for a long time. Whether it's I-25, the area by Raton Pass, not the I-25 areas that always get the attention, or several different stretches of 50. And that is a theme that you'll see across these slides, is making sure that we have a comprehensive approach to modernizing 50 and making sure that it can account for the kinds of traffic that it's taking. I swear we'll be done with that little Blue Canyon project one of these days, or Don Corum will kill me. 287, 160 is another place where you'll see it pop up again on a later region that some people here have heard of. And just many areas where we've been able to elevate the importance of these rural road projects in ways that just had not been getting done before. Northwest Colorado, and really so many areas in CDOT Region 3, which comprises a lot of the geography of the state in aggregate. And we're really proud of the range of projects that we're getting done in this part of the state, which includes, having to balance the needs of the mountain communities with the agricultural areas, with the challenges that come with physically building these projects, to my previous point about Little Blue Canyon. What you see here is a mix that is reflective of needing to do all of these things at once, again, with resources that even under the best of circumstances are limited, and also figure out how you do them in a way that protects the nature of the landscape, maximizes for safety, while also, acknowledging that some of these areas are just harsh terrain, and, reflecting a lot of what we heard in the 10-year planning process about needing, to make sure that we do things like, wider shoulders and better passing lanes, and also just taking care of pavement quality. One of my favorite stories on this slide is the US 50 project from Grand Junction to Delta. I think by the time I had been here 6 months, I had heard 6 nicknames for this stretch of US 50. The roller coaster remains my favorite. And Mike Goolsby, when I had just gotten here, took me in a vehicle that would maximize the experience of driving that stretch, and drove over it a little too fast. Made an impression. But that project, which we broke ground on, got at the beginning of last season, is now almost done. And you drive over it now, and it's still a little dippy, and they assure us that remaining part will be taken care of next season. But it was kind of an iconically frustrating area to drive that is just not anymore. And I love the fact that the need to do that really came out of the 10-year planning process, and just the kind of citizen complaints that helped us to guide the priorities. There are other areas here that I think reinforce that kind of optimization of secondary routes that just get a lot of traffic, even though they're fairly far out. Lots of different kinds of projects here. The US 6 project in Avon is one that the communities have felt very strongly about for a long time. And it was just a neat story of coordination between CDOT sort of executing a local vision. The Colorado 9 project from Frisco to Breckenridge is a place where, a lot of the economy in that area depends on being able to get through that stretch. And it was, pretty awful experience for a long time. The resurfacing near Leadville just got completed at the very end of the season. And then, some of the sort of state of good repair projects that probably won't last forever, but we still need them, chip seal in Steamboat Springs being one of them. Turning to the projects in Northeast Colorado, and this, yes, I see the Hofmeister family standing strong. And your cousin would kill me for not mentioning that, this is a place where the governor mentioned the kind of inherent tensions between urban and rural. You've got the needs of the I-25 corridor kind of butting up against, the many needs in the Eastern Plains here. And, we all are facing down the fact that our crummy pavement ratings in some instances are due in many respects to the deterioration on the eastern part of 70 and 76. And, there's just a lot of needs there and a lot of mileage, and, having to figure out how to balance those things. One big piece of business that is getting done directly because of the first tranche of funds under Senate Bill 260 is a major down payment on the concrete fixes on 76. It doesn't capture all of them. There is more resurfacing to go around in that area, but it's a place where, it makes a big investment, and we'll get some of the worst deck off our inventory. And it includes a mix of kind of immediate repairs with longer term structural ones. So we're throwing in some Band-Aids to get us, a little bit more life while we start to take on those deeper resurfacings in a way which we just hadn't done before. All right, and Southwest Colorado. Never heard of it. I don't know. There was some guy who had an idea that we needed a project on 550-160 connection. With a hat tip to Mike here, that project, which was just getting started when I got here, you go and it is like heavy infrastructure now. And that is one of the examples of the major projects in our 10-year plan not just being in Denver. I mean, this was, I think Mike can correct me, but it's one of the 2 biggest, if not the biggest project in that region. It was the first design build project in that region. Went to a Colorado firm. and just very precedent setting in a lot of ways for the kinds of innovation that went into it. And it's pretty cool to see it go from being a set of design plans that was just getting its sea legs a couple years ago to being big things that you can't miss when you're driving the area. The work across multiple stretches of 160 is pretty remarkable. I think we have a picture of the project that has been underway this season, which is one of my favorite ones to drive through because it's been really fun to watch the wildlife underpass and overpass go up. If you haven't seen them, the overpass is really cool. It's a bunch of prefabricated arches that they brought in that are very visually fun construction to look at, but it also included consolidating that safety work with the resurfacing project. So the team did an extraordinary job pulling together several projects and delivering it in an efficient way. And it's one that we're really proud of. Could go through a similar story for all of these, but just want to make sure that we're giving some texture and not just having these smaller projects be items on a list. And that kind of brings me to the next one, which I just wanted to talk about for a moment, which is that part of what we're trying to do is give lift to the things that sometimes fall below the radar when we talk about projects and why they're important. And the ones I just mentioned are kind of a mix of our capital plan. I would be remiss in not talking about how important taking care of the basics, with the work of our maintenance forces is to keeping, many of our roads, urban and rural, intact, but particularly for the places where it's sort of hard to access. We've done a lot of work on crack sealing. And one thing I just wanted to call out, because I know that a lot of folks here engaged, is that we were able last year to work with the contractors on an understated but important legislative fix to raise the limit for how much work CDOT maintenance teams can do in-house on these sort of smaller projects, particularly in kind of more remote areas where it's sometimes actually hard to bring in a contractor. This is something that has been needed for a very, very long time. We were able to negotiate a compromise, not quite as high a limit as we wanted, but higher than it was. And what this will do is unlock being able to just go do that kind of glorified pothole fixing across the state at a more robust level. So, this is as important a part of our kind of program of work as all of the big projects. I wanted to touch just briefly on the work in Glenwood Canyon as we talk about the past year. Hard to omit that being a part of our lives as it was. If ever there was a reminder that the terrain on Colorado's roads are different than in other parts of the country, there you have it. And it's, it faced two of the most extreme events we've seen in that area, one after another. You saw a 500-year flood event right at the top, the historic fires, and, I think everyone was tracking the results. I am so excited to say that I was there earlier this week, and the road, if you're not looking for where the damage on the actual road was, you might not be able to find it when you're driving through. The road work on kind of the structural area is done. There's still some of the guardrails will be fixed when they're done with the debris removal work, but an incredible amount of work that was done in a very, very rapid time. Thanks to people from across the state pitching in. I mean, this was really an all hands on deck effort where I had never seen the CDOT team from across the state mobilize on one spot the way they did when this happened to get that open for business as quickly as possible. The work that's happening now is related to the removal of the debris from the river. So long story short, there's several very, very large piles and they're being removed by two contractors, one of whom is had just installed sort of a crane structure to be able to haul the mud out of the sort of debris sediment within the river onto the road, and it'll get trucked out by the road. The goal is to have this done by the spring so that it doesn't cause flooding issues. And so far so good. And it was a relief to see that there's been progress in the last few weeks since I was there last to check on it. And it was not an easy few weeks to be removing anything from anywhere in that area. Just want to touch briefly as we think about corridors, just to reiterate that this year there has been a particular amount of focus on dealing with some of the issues along I-70, which get a pretty hefty beating every year. Combination of safety interventions like adding the variable speed limit signs, which have been working really well in places where we put them in. It's been a terrible year for crashes and fatalities, as you've probably seen. And one of the tools that we have available is to make it easier to slow down traffic with consequences in places where that's necessary. We used this on the GAP project too, and it really helped during a snowstorm or something, that we could slow down traffic and have it be enforceable. Repaving between Silverthorne and Frisco, repaving Vail Pass in conjunction with the bigger project that we're doing to add an auxiliary lane on Vail Pass alongside features like new truck ramp, which just got completed. And all in all, trying to just get out of the backlog of needs along this corridor, which is something like filling a bucket with a hole in it. Governor mentioned our Revitalizing Main Streets program and just the jolt that this has placed into our economy across the state. I want to call out how neat it's been to watch the use of this program within rural communities. This is one that we frankly established a bit on the fly. When it became clear at the beginning of the pandemic that we needed to do something to help communities, move a lot of their business outside, we cobbled together some resources from a previous multimodal allocation and just started making small grants to communities. And we were sort of delighted to see how broad and how varied and how creative the uptake was. And this has rapidly become one of the most kind of ongoing ways that we can collaborate with local governments in every corner of the state and just have a chance to as much work on executing their vision as provide money. And I think it's been a pleasure to work on, in part because it's opened our doors to partners we didn't get to work with as directly in the past. And I think it's really done marvelous things for the collaboration between CDOT and local governments. And just to put a little bit of a point on one or two of the projects, that this picture down there is Salida. Our larger grants under this program went to a very varied group of communities, including many of the smaller cities and towns. And we just did a bit of a case study on Craig, just to reinforce how exciting it's been to see the ideas that are coming out of communities near and far. How are we doing on time? I know that there's a lot of interest in hearing about exactly where the resources from Senate Bill 260 are going. So I wanted to spend a few of my remaining minutes, if we're okay on time, Sarah, Christian, talking about what's coming next year. And I won't bore you with all of the details on 260. You're very familiar with it. I want to dig into what's coming up the pike and what projects are underway. So the way that 260 is structured is there is sort of an upfront investment, thanks to the ability to utilize stimulus money now, with the new revenues coming in over time. So we have allocated, with the Transportation Commission's approval, sort of that first set of upfront money, and that is going to a very specific set of projects, which will complement the ongoing tranche of certificates of participation under 267, which was the previous transportation bill. And not to go too nerdy on you, but one of the benefits of 260 is that it gave us the confidence that we'll be able to pay down the debt service on those COPs. So there had been doubt about whether we'd be able to fully cash the debt for the out years of that, and we now know that we will. So there's a lot of blurriness between those funding sources because of how the previous bill was structured. So this kind of next class of projects, I'll just go through quickly, and we'll share this slide deck so folks can have it, and then the report that's coming out as well. Gives you a sense of the next group of projects in Southeast Colorado, Northwest Colorado. Again, these are largely rural road projects, many of which have been in the queue for a long time. The Colorado 13 in Garfield County has been in the works for many years, and is one of those sort of classic projects to provide safety, wider shoulders, wildlife underpass, drainage. 92 between Hotchkiss and Crawford is one we had to delay a bit so that it wouldn't be happening exactly while Little Blue Canyon was under construction. And then Lake City is a nice reminder of the conversations we had, because I remember that was one of the places where we had one of the very early conversations around the needs of the 10-year plan on the statewide network. Northeast Colorado, I mentioned the ongoing work on 76, also 71, 385, and more to come on all of these. And the needs on 76 alone could keep us busy for a good long time. Southwest Colorado, again, really digging into that focus on 160. And I'll give a shout out to the broadband project, putting fiber in on Wolf Creek Pass. This is one where the beginnings of it predated the current transportation bill, but it has required some additional funding to get it done in full. And this is incredibly important for providing sort of digital equity in the region, and is one that we're very proud of. And I think with that, do we have a couple minutes for questions? All right, someone moderating or me?
Right here. First question is on the last slide. Talking about the 160 ITS infrastructure. Do you have a timeline? I'm the actual county attorney. Very interested in the CDOT it's cutting out dark fiber, bringing the fiber over Wolf Creek Pass. So I just, I know it was delayed. I'll give an update on the time frame, the completion of that project.
Can I follow up with you on the specific schedule?
Sure.
Director, thanks for being here with us today. So a question that actually came up from yesterday had to do with the federal monies, how they're allocated out with regard to 260. 380 million currently is being allocated. Where is that going? Where did it go? And because it's really not that clear. Is it simply being taking the place of the fee that was implemented through 260 and then not being charged to the people of Colorado, and is that just displacing that fee, or what? It doesn't make any sense. So I was just wondering where it went first, and then
which part of the federal money? There's several different sources.
Well, all we were told was that maybe somebody here remembers more specifics, but it just said $380 million that was allocated in Senate Bill 260. So we can follow up on that too if we need to, but just curious as to how that was allocated to 260 and where. The other thing is maybe more of just a comment, but the Senate Bill 260, probably the characterization of the prior legislation, be it Senate Bill 267 or Senate Bill 1 from 2018, had the mechanisms in there to pay out COPs and to retire debt. And they were ignored and chosen to be removed, all without raising fees. So I would push back on your characterization of prior legislation that actually did these things, same things without the fees that were generated and created, being called fees instead of taxes in Senate Bill 260. So that's that.
I can take those in reverse order. The 267 never actually had the resources to pay back the debt in full. There was a partial allocation out of the general fund to pay back the debt, but it was never sufficient such that it would have covered the full entirety of the 4 years. There was kind of generic language that would have charged it to other sources, basically CDOT's base budget. So it was written in a way that was a little confusing, but it was partial and not full. And I think the portion you're referring to was a piece out of the general fund, but it was never sufficient to pay for the whole aspect.
That's not what I said. Senate Bill 1 and Senate Bill 267 in conjunction with each other actually did do it.
Happy to go deeper dive on the math offline if you'd be interested. It had all of the general fund been pursued, it would have covered part of it, but not all of it. Again, happy to have a longer conversation though, and I think the reality is that before Senate Bill 260, it was not at all clear that we were taking out the third tranche, let alone the fourth tranche of Senate Bill 267. On the question of the federal funds, there's several different groupings of federal funds that I think we're sort of talking about, which because of the numerous rounds of federal bills get a bit conflated, but there's several of them. There was federal funding that was specifically included in Senate Bill 260, which was out of kind of the general pot of stimulus funds, right? There were some dollars that were not colored and they came to the state with a lot of flexibility about what to do with them. There were federal dollars that came through the infrastructure bill that are specific to the Colorado Department of Transportation and our counterpart agencies across the country. And then there's there's ongoing conversation about how to allocate some of the remaining federal funds. the Senate Bill $260 are being, at least the portion that come to CDOT are going to the 10-year plan. I mean, that's the way that we're programming the dollars is looking at the new federal funding, and that's an operative word, together with the state dollars and balancing it out against how we make sure that we get our 10-year plan done. There are, you have probably all seen a number that's something like 3.7 billion out there reflecting what was in the federal infrastructure bill. That was a very misleading number from Washington, in my view, because what it did was it took the number from reauthorizing our base program, which pays for asset management for 5 years, and then that plus. So when you do just the plus, it's between 700 and 900 million new money on top of the base funding that has been part of the federal aid highway program, somewhat adjusted for inflation for a very, very, very long time. And that increment, we are working with the Transportation Commission to apply towards the 10-year plan in conjunction with the SB 260 funds to kind of come up with a cadence for how we get the rest of the plan done. And that's an exercise that's going on right now. We actually just did one workshop on it with the commission this month. There's another one coming up next month, and that's a process that we're working through now as we learn exactly how the federal allocations are going. And you may have had one more question. No? Okay.
This is Steve Odorizio with Adams County. As you know, we are an urban, suburban, and rural community in Adams County, 72 miles wide. I just want to first start off by saying thank you, because there's a tension in the state, whether you're talking about building buildings and homes or roads, about anti-growth. And I want to thank you for standing with us. Just because Denver and Boulder are done growing doesn't mean the rest of us have to be. And I think that you're helping us with that balance and making sure that all capacity improvements are not thrown out the window. I want to thank you for that. But I also think to other folks in the rural areas, that I think if you could explain a little bit more how you are balancing that, because there is a lot of tension out there trying to get us to not grow, to not fix our roads out in the rural areas. And I just want to thank you for addressing it, but also share kind of how you're addressing it, because it is a very tough issue. And it's pitting us, even within my own community, folks against each other. And I just want to thank you for that.
It's a great question. And there's a lot of tension right now around the question of highway expansion, right? It's something that's not limited to Colorado, and we're hearing it from Washington and everywhere else as well. And look, it's hitting on a real issue, which is that if we are not thoughtful about how we do expansion when we need it, it can have impacts that were not what we intended on places where people live, right? I mean, there's far too many examples across the country of places where a highway bulldozed through the middle of the city and broken apart forever, right? And reckoning with that is something that is a real thing and needed, and is a good conversation to be having. I think here we are farther ahead than other parts of the country in having solutions for how you do that, right? For all of the brain damage that the Central 70 project caused far too many people, it actually came to a good place. It's expensive. But what it is doing is it's adding capacity in a way that actually changes the city in a good way. And we wouldn't want to replicate the budget of that too many times, but I think what it forced us to think about in terms of how you deal with the fact that people live in places and you also need capacity are the right sets of conversations to be happening that put us many years ahead of a lot of other parts of the country. We're applying those lessons with the 270 project in Steve's neighborhood, where there is no question that we need more capacity there, right? And we have and will continue to have the hard conversations about how to do it right. But it's a place where all you have to do is drive it once to know what the problem is. And but because we're more sensitized now, I think, to where these points of contention lie, we're having the hard conversations at the beginning instead of after we try and finish an environmental review and get into a set of years-long disagreements about it. So it is taking some time, but it's taking time at the beginning of the project in a way where we're having it out over those issues in a constructive way where we just put everything on the table. And that's, I think, what we're trying to have be the new normal for conversations around these kinds of projects.
Let's thank Shoshana for joining us.
So just a couple of things as we do wrap up. I want to share with you all that phase